Begin.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the virtual career fair sponsored by NISS, the National Institute of Statistical Sciences. I am Esra Kurum from the Department of Statistics at University of California, Riverside, and I'll be the moderator for today's career fair. In today's career fair, we'll feature 3 speakers who will give us information about their perspective on career paths in non-health industry job opportunities. And our schedule for today has the lineup as Victor Lowe, Artificial Intelligence and Data Science Center of Excellence Leader in Workplace Investing at Fidelity Investments. Daniel Tu, the Senior Director of Model Validation at Citizens Financial Group. And we have Danny Jin, the Statistics Director at Epsilon. For each speaker, we have 15 minutes of presentations. And at the end, we will have time for questions from the audience and the speakers. Here are some logistics for today's webinar. Glenn Johnson and James Rosenberger are the hosts for this session. Attendees are view-only participants, but we encourage you to submit your questions to our speakers. You can do so by clicking on the Q&A icon at the bottom of the Zoom window. Type your question, click enter. Finally, a brief information about the Zoom settings. When a speaker is sharing his or her screen, like I'm doing right now, if you want to minimize the video display of other speakers, you can do so by clicking on the dash button that appears on the panel, on top of the panel that shows the videos of all speakers. And similarly, you can also click the speaker view button using the button right next to the dash to view the video of that speaker only. And with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Victor Lowe, who currently leads the Artificial Intelligence and Data Science of Excellence in Workspace Investing at Fidelity Investments. Victor is a pioneer of uplift and TrueLift modeling, and he has 25 years of extensive consulting experience in employing data-driven solutions in a wide variety of areas, including marketing and finance. So Victor, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Esra. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. And my name is Victor Lowe, and I'm glad to be here to talk about careers. So let me make it full screen.
Go ahead. Oops.
Yep.
There we go.
So before I start, I was asked to just introduce myself a little bit more and why I become a data scientist and so on. So I've been in this business for over 25 years, and my former education background was Master in Operations Research, PhD Statistics, and postdoc in Management Science. And that was a long time ago, and then I jumped to the industry right away after academia. Started with a management consulting career, and then banking and financial services. And even though majority of my career has been in finance, actually a lot of it touches on transportation and healthcare, risk management, and many other fields, and also some actuarial science. Okay, so first, before I talk about careers, let's talk about 2 well-known statisticians who mentioned about how useful statistics is. And since most of you are in the field of statistics, I think we are very fortunate because statistics is highly used almost anywhere. Long time ago, well-known statistician John Tukey said that as a statistician, you get to play in everyone's backyard. So you can do a lot of things. More recently, another well-known statistician, Xiao Li-Meng, mentioned that, well, forget about playing in everyone's backyard. We are now being invited to everyone's study room, living room, and trusted with the task of being their offspring's first quantitative nanny. So that tells you how significant it is. Okay, so here's the content of what of my talk in the next 10 minutes or so. We'll talk about general statistics career opportunities, and then I will dive into each of those fields a little bit, and then I will finish with some career rankings. So first, statistics career opportunities. I classified them into roughly 6 categories. The first one is healthcare, which we won't talk about much because lots of statisticians and biostatisticians are already in that field. And you know, that includes pharmaceutical firms, hospitals, and so on. And the second category is the field that I am in, which is now known as data science or analytics or artificial intelligence or machine learning. There are many names that mean more or less the same thing. And the common titles could be, the common career titles could be data scientist, analyst, machine learning engineer, or statistician, or marketing scientist, or some other titles, but those are some of the common ones. And the very unique thing about this category is it applies to all industries. So it's not industry specific. Once you do data science or analytics in one industry, you can apply it to other industries, mostly quite transferable. So that's quite good about this. And because it's required by all industries, the career opportunities are also huge. So that's category 2. Number 3 is loosely known as operations management, and some people call it logistics and supply chain management. So what it does is when a company needs to produce a product, they need to find a way to produce a product efficiently, and they need to produce a high quality product. They also need to transport, to move a product from one place to another place, or raw materials from one place to another place. So that involves a lot of production support, quality control, manufacturing support, transportation, and so on. That applies to many industries as well, but not all industries, but many, so including, of course, transportation, retail, manufacturing, and even finance and defense and others. This field has been around for a long time, actually. A lot of people in the past have some sort of operations management and operations research background. So that's why the titles could be OR analyst or operations analyst, but sometimes these days they could be known as data scientists as well. Okay, so so number 4 is more specific to finance. It's about investment management or quantitative finance. And in terms of the titles, they are usually known as quantitative analysts. And these days, some of them are also known as data scientists because it's now a popular name. And it's only available in certain financial firms, even not all financial firms, because in the investment community, there are many ways to manage a portfolio. There's a fundamental approach, there's a technical approach, and there's a quantitative approach. It's the third one that uses large amount of statistical analysis. And it's a highly financially rewarding, this field. But in terms of career opportunities, because it's limited to certain part of finance, it's probably not as big as number 2 or number 3 in terms of number of openings. But it's highly rewarding. And number 5 has been a growing field, especially after the financial crisis in 2008. Banks have been hiring lots of quantitative risk analysts or risk managers. And those are usually in large banks, commercial banks. And Daniel too actually will be speaking more on that. And that's about how to manage financial risk properly. So related to financial risk is number 6. That's actuarial science, which is also related to risk, but it's more specific to the insurance industry, so which is a sort of a subset of the financial industry. And the titles are, of course, actuaries and actuarial consultants and so on. So I won't speak much on actuarial science because it's a pretty unique field and it requires years of going through years of tests, and you have to get a certificate on that. So let's talk a little bit more about the common methods or approaches for each of these approaches. So number 2 is, it has a lot of machine learning, or sometimes just statistical modeling. Natural language processing is one of the popular ones. And since causality is still a very important topic, so people tend to do a lot of experiments. And if experiments are not available, we can do causal inference for observational data. And it obviously requires a lot of advanced programming, because people in the data science field quite often have to analyze data in all kinds of formats, including unstructured data. And sometimes survey research is also helpful. So in terms of background, they tend to have degrees in computer science or statistics or data science or other fields. So for operations management, because it involves forecasting and optimization a lot. So the first thing is time series forecasting, which could also utilize machine learning and deep learning kind of techniques for time series analysis. And statistical quality control is still a very important thing for operations management. And I will actually have a slide to talk more about that. So in terms of background, a lot of them have degrees in operations management, operations research, industrial engineering, statistics, or computer science. So the next one is investment management, because most people will have to analyze a lot of time series data. So time series analysis is one of the top things, and as well as general statistical modeling. And the latest techniques would involve some form of machine learning or deep learning that could also help, as well as natural language processing. And in terms of qualifications, many of them have degrees in finance, economics, statistics, engineering, computer science, and many of them have a CFA certificate. So number 5 is risk management. Risk management is also another financial field. And by definition, it involves a lot of quantitative risk analytics, which also includes some time series analysis and statistical modeling and machine learning. Part of risk management is operational risk, and that also touches on things like cryptography. Risk management can be loosely classified into multiple different things: market risk, credit risk, and operational risk. So it's the operational risk that would touch on many other things. And market risk and credit risk are probably a little more contained, but they are huge fields by themselves. And they tend to have degrees in economics. And to my understanding, economics is the top one, but then other fields like statistics and engineering are also quite common. And they typically have another qualification called FRM, Financial Risk Manager. So the last one is actuarial science, which I won't talk much about. And again, it involves a lot of a series of exams. And after that, you'll get an ASA or FSA. So let me dive into some of those fields. Data science. Data science is really a combination of multiple techniques, including heavy programming, heavy math and statistics. And usually we need some kind of subject matter expertise. If you're analyzing something about something for marketing, you need to know something about marketing. So if you may need to pick up some MBA marketing textbooks to know something about marketing. What is segmentation? What is supply and demand curves, and so on. Likewise for risk and healthcare and so on. And data science typically also requires a lot of soft skills for business consulting, writing, verbal communication, and so on. The link at the bottom is a recent article I wrote that talks about this data scientist career a little bit more, if you're interested. So one example of using data science and analytics is for CRM, or customer relationship management. What it is really to track and optimize customer contacts. So essentially using historical customer contact data and apply analytics to improve future customer interactions. And loosely, it is something like this. The plan is to have some kind of campaign or program design. So you want to design a marketing campaign, and using sampling techniques and experimental design, or in the business field is known as A/B testing, for treatment and control, or treatment 1, treatment 2, and control group. And then after you run the marketing campaign, you measure it using statistical significance test. And then you build models to see what kinds of customers are interested in what kinds of products using statistical modeling and or machine learning techniques. And once you have a predicted probability of buying something for each person, you can optimize for your next campaign using some form of operations research techniques, such as integer programming method, to help you optimize the overall response or overall revenue. So that's a combination of predictive and prescriptive analytics. Another field that highly utilizes combination of predictive and prescriptive analytics is in operations management. And in this case, it's for call center analytics, which is one of the very common fields out there, because many large companies have large call centers. And the first thing they need to know is about the demand in order to know how many agents they need to hire, how many call center agents they need to hire to meet the demand. The first thing they need to know is what the demand will be. And it could be traditional time series analysis. It could be some form of deep learning, such as recurrent neural net for time series analysis. That's step number 1. Step number 2 is, okay, so once you know something about how much demand, meaning how many customers will call you in the next few months, so how many people you will need to hire to meet the demand. Now, that depends on not just the demand, but also the service level. So how fast do you want to pick up the phone, and so on. So that usually involves some form of queuing theory, which is a probability theory, a branch of probability theory, also a branch of operations research. And the modern techniques usually involve some form of discrete event simulation, which is a form of computer simulation. And once you can match the supply to demand, then you can optimize your workforce. That's stage number 3, using some kind of linear programming or stochastic programming models. So this is a good integration of predictive and prescriptive analytics. So next one is investment management. It was in the quantitative investment management field. It was mostly founded by Harry Markowitz in 1952 from his PhD dissertation. And Harry proposed this way to optimize a portfolio. So we look at many portfolio choices, and he would consider maximizing the return or minimizing the risk. And he would define the return as expected value of future return. And the risk is just a standard deviation or volatility of return. So each of the dots in this graph is a portfolio choice. And you can see that C is better than B because at a given risk level, C has a higher return. And A is also better than B because at a given expected value level, A has a lower standard deviation or lower risk. So in other words, A and C are lying on the efficient frontier. So how do you find the efficient frontier to optimize your portfolio becomes the foundation of the modern portfolio theory. And he used a combination of operations research and ultimately regression analysis to solve the problem. And it's a solid career by itself. And of course, he won the Nobel Prize almost 20 years ago, almost 30 years ago. So another related field is risk management. For financial risk management has a lot to do with some techniques such as value at risk, VAR or VAR. And what it is so what's the worst case scenario? So if you look at the 1% worst case scenario, probability of return less than or equal to some value equals to 1%. So what is that value? And then you can use a distribution to determine it using historical data. You can plot the PDF or CDF and then you can reverse it and to find the quantile or percentile to calculate the VAL. And of course, this involves much more than this. This is just the very basic definition of value at risk. And there are many subfields of risk management. So the last slide is a set of career rankings. And let's take a look at what these career sites say about data science and statistics. Glassdoor ranked data science as the very top job. And CareerCast, another career site, ranked data scientists the top, statisticians number 2. By the way, they all use different methodologies, right? So some of them combine statistician and data scientists, some of them separate them. And US News ranked statistician as the top one. They did not rank data scientists. They also ranked mathematician, actuary, and OR analyst. And then LinkedIn said data scientist is the top most promising career. So regardless of what the title is, they're all related to statistics. And whether it's called data scientist, statistician, or whatever, these are among the very best careers in our country. So congratulations on choosing one of the best careers. Thank you. So I will stop sharing. I will pass it to the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Victor, for all the information that you gave us. It was very informative. And our next speaker is Daniel Tu, who leads a team that validates all models used in Citizens Bank. And Daniel has over 20 years of industry and consulting experience in areas including financial risk management, financial and credit modeling, marketing, and economic analysis. And with that, I'll now turn the mic over to Daniel.
Yeah, thanks, Esther, for the introduction, and thanks, Victor, for the comprehensive overview of the methodologies and the career paths for different non-health industries that covers my industry briefly as well. So I'm going to just focus on the industry that I worked for almost 20 years. I joined a bank back in 2000, year 2000, so it's my 19th year of working in the commercial banking industry. I worked for 3 different banks. In the middle of that, I joined a major consulting firm and also providing consulting services for all kinds of commercial banks. So I never leave this industry. So my job is focusing on various kinds of models, kind of moved from frontline modeling for the frontline business to the midline risk management to the backline capital management. Now I'm in my current job for my 10th year and managing a team of model validators, validating all kinds of models used in a commercial bank. I work for Citizens Financial Group, which is a bank holding company for Citizens Bank, which is the 13th largest commercial bank. It's a super regional bank in the Northeast and Midwest. People maybe in the West or South may not know this bank, but our bank industry very segmented. And there's banks from mega banks like Citi and Chase, Bank of America, to super regionals like SunTrust, Third, and Citizens Bank, to some smaller banks like in Massachusetts that only in one state, the Eastern Bank, and banks like that. So that's given, I'll talk about it later, that give a lot of opportunities within different banks because they're segmented. A lot of all these banks need some quantitative talents, call it statistician and data scientist or mathematician, whatever you call them, but that's very, very transferable skills as Victor described. So I will, just move ahead my slides. I'll give a disclaimer first that all the opinions and materials contained here not reflect my employer's opinions, but solely my own. And so that models, as I mentioned, used in the commercial banks, right? So the bank uses all kinds of models and all areas of business, be the retail, wholesale, investment, treasury, operational risk, and the market result, different the areas, and the fraud detection. And in the recent years, because of the data proliferation, that there are a lot of fraud happening in banking business sides, and there's also a lot of models brought out and to fighting the fraud. I bet that the fraud itself are driven by some quantitative method trying to exploit the people's financial information. So we deployed a lot of models in there, fair lending, market risk, all these kind of models. And the models that we have a specific definition in the bank that they're quantitative method, and for systems or approaches that apply statistical, economic, financial, or mathematical theories. So it's there's subtle differences. I think that they are related, but the statistical versus economical, financial, there are different methodology tied to that. So subtle differences in different areas for models used in the bank. I will mention a little later. This also include that not necessarily models, but someone giving statistical knowledge and understanding the data. The banks also employ a lot of non-model, called the non-model analytical approaches. So that's to derive some of the insight into the underlying data. Like the segmentations and some of these, just a simple summarizing the data in a different ways, like a data cube can introduce a lot of insights that are very beneficial for business decision making. So that's some, I do not just focus on the models, but broadly speaking, some quantitative methodologies here. And the reason I'm in this job for almost 10 years, that it's also become a, not get bored about it, is first, there's all kind of models across all type of banking business there. And also there are heightened attention in the past 10 years from our banking regulators. The banking industry is one of the most regulated industry, probably behind health sciences that heavily regulated, of course, that relate to people's health and life. And this relate to people's financial health and money, and so mostly regulated one. The models, since last crisis, right, in 2008, 9, 10, right, so people realize that a lot of models used in the financial service industry are flawed, based on flawed methodology or flawed assumptions or inputs, and there should be well controlled in governing this kind of model risk, so that there's every kind of major bank, not major banks any more than, I would say, 10 billion, and the kind of in asset in size, that's typically large community banks and above. And the type of banks have to set up some kind of model validation function to validate all the quantitative models, make sure they are conceptually sound, performs well, and the assumptions inputs are tested and reasonable. So that's the what I said, the heightened attention that from the regulators and all these financial institutions have set up this function for model validation, model risk management function. I'm happy to be in this function leading the validation team that covering all these kind of models. So it's, to me, it's very interesting, and I get bored. There's always different kind of models, different kind of approaches. As time evolved, the AI, machine learning, and some advanced methodologies, big data, and the non-traditional data emerge. So it's always the learning opportunities for us. All right, so before we talk about the models, like I'll say that hopefully what I cover is mainly introduce the models used in the banks and see what kind of models and what's the pitfalls and what's the structure, the lesson learned from model building, give you an idea that as a statistician now, what's kind of background we are looking for and what kind of skill set and the knowledge that should probably to acquire beyond just the core competence of statistical theories. Right, so before we talk about the quantitative model, we have to understand the industry's business model, how a business making money, and so not just making money, how they provide their products, right, to the customers. And then next is how the models drive this productizations, how to manage the product risk. So for the banking side, the banking product, it's bread and butter products are just deposit and loans, right? So on the top right is the spread income that are driven by the number of volume and units and the net interest margin that we earn. So the typical banks is that borrow for 3%, lend out for 6%, you make money for 3%, as simple as that. But that's driven by all kind of products and the interest margins and underlying risks tied to each type of product. Fee income is the, as I understand, is not the margin, but you provide some services like charge you monthly fees or charging investment fees, mortgage fees that are driven by that. So that's the top, that's a general, that's a 30,000 feet view of the revenue side. And overall, it's a very high level. The risk cost tied to that. The bank is very tight in risk management. That's one of the most regulated industry because of the credit risk, the operational risk that could, if the bank failed, then you get all the money that from the depositors away, right? Even that's insured by the by FDIC, but that's taxpayers' money, so that have be well controlled and well managed. It's not some just wealthy investors' money that in the bank. It's really the deposits that the fundamental financing source are from individual depositors, so that to manage the risk carefully. Operating cost, of course, there's other type of costs. So the revenue expense, as we know, this is a typical kind of drive the bank's profitability, return on assets, and the risk-based capital to measure the returns at the end. So it's how that the most major banks are on public companies. So that's well measured in the stock market, how the banks make their money. Any negative news from operational risk event, anything that that can be a negative impact on its image or stock returns are, it's very well managed. Try to be at least. So next one is more for 10,000 feet view, more for going to the model level, that how the banks use models to drive the profitability, right? So I listed some of the more illustration from the right-hand side. We use macro factors that them have to understand the banks what's the economy, because banks is a business and very heavily influenced by the general health of the economy. So the fundamental drivers, I would call it the macro factors in employment rate, CPI, consumer price index, GDP growth, all these kind of housing price indexes, the macro factors that different models were influenced by different factors, right? You try to find the most relevant factors and then combine that with the internal risk factors, business drivers. We say that how the creditor, what the behaviors scores, the credit risk scores, like the FICO, like your borrowing behavior, your past performance with the bank. And then this fitting into different type of models: revenue, customer acquisition models, pricing models, staff cost models, and other cost type of models. Then you move down to this impact into that generally the high level view on net interest income and expenses. And in the end, you flow into the capital impact, whether you earn more money to get more returns to the capital, or you lose money to eat away the capital. So that going to the kind of more street level view models using the credit product life cycle, with marketing and starting from the try to get the customers into the door to buy the banking product, and then you move to that evaluate the riskiness of the customer. We call it acquisition and originations models. We have credit risk origination model, underwriting models. FICO score is a generic kind of models, but the bigger banks always develop its own models to evaluate the riskiness of the underlying prospects. So after you book the account and it's become your customer, you have managed that account. We call it account servicing, customer management, account management type of models to increase the credit line and or decrease it based on the cross-sell different product to offer a comprehensive banking services. Those driven by those models to determine what's the most likelihood that most fit suitable product for the underlying customer. So you will increase the efficiency by creating models to predict the next product for the customer. And if the certain ways is always risk there, right? So there's delinquency there, there's any people cannot afford it, and there's a collections and recovery type of models to see that which ones we should go first, which even sometimes at the what kind of a priority and to call, or sometimes we have to restructure. There's the credit that to evaluate how much of the model the bank will lose. So there's other type of statistical models, and this view is more from a credit product perspective. And for the fair lending, there's models regarding that detect potential discriminatory behavior in making lending decisions. And that's well known that from minority, from this age perspective, there's certain factors that the banks should steer to stick to the fair lending model. Balance model, yield models, fee models, expense models. I would say that that's I mentioned. There's all these models that in all areas of banks that require a comprehensive data sources, right? So that's going to give you a data view here. And there's alternative data source in the recent years is much more hot topic that from the networking, social networking, from the utilities data, which can supplement the traditional data source of credit bureau, which is the big pie here. So I'll leave this data challenge and lesson learned in modeling to your rate. That's I just moving to model risk management function that what I mentioned that is a relatively new independent function. In every bank, there are probably a 5-to-1 ratio. If we have 50 modelers, you probably need 10 to validate and check and audit the models. So that's the function. It's a standalone independent function. It's driven by, if you want to know more about this function, I suggest that if you want to move into the area, read a banking regulator risk guidance called OCC 1112 or FR 11.7. So that's a very comprehensive kind of requirement for how to manage model risk in the banking area. So back to the higher end bank industry, I said the banks is a very fragmented industry. I said there's thousands of banks and big and small, right? The commercial banks and there are even mega banks, super regionals, there are probably 20 plus of that, plus regional banks, 40, 50, large community and credit unions, that which you have probably a couple hundred that will have its dedicated quantitative team. And that have a listing in the open information sources, you can find it out. And the monoline financing companies like financial services, like auto finance or mortgage finance firms, consulting firms, they all need this kind of serving. The financial service consulting is the biggest part of the consulting firm for the big four, and also other major consulting firms. They tailor toward the need for the financial companies. And financial system solution firms, financial data providers, fintech serving the banks, they are trying to provide some kind of quantitative modeling service to the customers, which are the banks. So that that's also employ statisticians, econometricians, data scientists, all these jobs there. So their variety job titles. I would say that the job titles is less important than the description. I just look at my own companies. The data scientists hire titles in our IT department to prepare and cleaning the data, or in our data science team that are creating models for that. And we are, my department is more called the quantitative analyst and the quantitative technical advisor, senior technical advisor, quantitative risk manager, quantitative risk senior manager, director, senior director. So this kind of job titles, but fundamentally the skill set are similar and the same. If you demonstrate your core competency across that, you have a basic knowledge of the business side, and you have fundamental communication skills to explain the model results to the other business managers, and that's what we are looking for. Right? So
wrap it up so that we have some time for the questions at the end.
Sure, yeah. So the recap here, I hope I covered all the 5 questions required for the presenters. And we have definitely our banks are hiring. You can go to our website, and myself have an opening too that just open up that hopefully that they'll find qualified candidates. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for all the information that you provided. And I would like to encourage our attendees to submit their questions to our speakers. To do so, you can use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom window, type in your question and click enter. Our last speaker is Danny Jin, who is the statistics director at Epsilon. He was part of the Epsilon team that won the first place in Direct Marketing Association's 2009 Analytic Challenge competition. His areas of expertise include predictive modeling, classification, and experimental design and measurement. Danny has serviced in various industries, including retail and financial service. Danny, please go ahead.
Sure, yeah. Daniel, can you please stop sharing? Okay, thank you. Okay, so we are talking about, today it's about non-healthcare industry. And I would actually like to, thank Victor to give a very good overview of the different opportunities outside of healthcare. And I think for where I'm working, so Epsilon, it's a marketing service provider. So we help our clients with their marketing programs, their loyalty marketing, those kind of things. Our group, provides strategic and analytic consulting service to our clients. So my talk will mainly focus on what kind of things we do and how the things you learned in your school can be applied in a marketing setting. So basically, we're going to talk about a couple of different things. One is we talk about, how we help our client kind of with what we call their customer experience cycle. It's an end-to-end process. And also, the clients come in different stages in terms of their involvement with analytics. Some is pretty early in the journey. Some is already well vested. So we can also talk about how we go in and partner with our clients along the journey. And then we will quickly talk about, as a vendor. So we actually serve a variety of different clients. They come in all sorts of industries. And last but not least, we're going to talk about, how we build our team here, what kind of skill set we look for, and what's a typical career path. So we actually, when you think about, basically we help our client. I think Victor mentioned about the CRM management. So that's customer relationship management. So our vision, we think about it in a cycle, and you think about kind of separates it into three different phases. So if you start from the top, the orange part, that's what we call developer foundation. So when we start a relationship with a client, as the first thing we do is, we help them try to understand, say, who are your customers? Do you have more, say, female customers? Are they older? What kind of education, income, lifestyle do they have? And then when you look at, you have so many customers, are they all the same? Or there's actually unique pockets of customer, what we call segments, right, within your customer base. And does it warrant, developing different, more tailored marketing strategy towards these different segments? And then once we have a solid foundation, we move on, say, what we call the blue part, we call enable connection. This is where when you think about your marketing program, you try to talk to your clients, try to connect with them, but then how do you target? Who do you target? Do you want to talk to everybody? But if you have limited marketing budget, do you want to kind of focus your efforts toward maybe a subset? If so, who should you talk to? And also, once you define the audience, what kind of message, through what channel, at what time, at what frequency should you talk to them? This is really what we call about optimize the touches. So, you try to kind of improve your efficiency about your marketing communications. So once you enable connection, you developed a very comprehensive program. The next thing we want to do is you want to make sure you have numbers to back up, say, we work with marketers in our clients' organization, and many of them actually need to be responsible, need to report to, say, their CFO, their CMO, all these C-suite executives. And they need numbers to back up saying, okay, the program is working. We are getting a good ROI, which is return on investment. So how do you do that? This is where, the measurement, the management comes in. So you want to develop a test and a learn scheme. Basically, this is more like experimental design. So you can set up, you think about like your test group where you may give them some kind of marketing touch, marketing message, marketing offers. And then you may also have a very similar group that you hold out as control, that you can measure the lift from your marketing program. And then you use the lift to kind of show, to demonstrate, to measure the success of your marketing program. And you can also monitor your marketing program over time. Because, you know, with today's very crowded marketing place, no strategy is gonna be good forever. So you need to really monitor your marketing program and then make adjustments. And sometimes we also talk about reallocating your resource. This is where you also want to understand, is your marketing program working, you know, most efficiently? Is there a room for improvement? You can use some kind of a statistical method to try to see whether, you know, how can you allocate based on the historic insights. So that kind of completes this cycle of, you know, a continued improvement, continued enhancement of a client's marketing program. So this slide talks about a lot of things given the limited time. Basically, you talk about, you know, we go into a client, we start a relationship. The first thing we do is we try to understand what is the business problem, what's the need, and how can we use our statistical knowledge, some kind of a statistical method to help solve the problem, to meet the need. So next thing we want to do is we want to do like a data audit. What kind of data the client has? Do they have all the necessary data already collected, or we need time to do that? And also, does the data kind of is sufficient, or do we need to augment that with what we call external data? There's actually a lot of data vendor out there, including Epsilon, including my organization. We have extra data that the client can, what we call append, to enhance their marketing program. And then once you have these two questions answered, then this is where, you know, you start to apply whatever analytic solutions that you come up with to help solve the problem. So when we say these solutions, basically, roughly we can separate them into these 4 different areas. You know, you start with identification. That is where, you know, you try to gain more understanding about the customers. And then you go into, you know, look at the different pockets of customer segmentation. There's, of course, different ways you can do segment, from very simple kind of what we call just business rule-based segmentation. Look at your customers' recency, you know, how, what's the last time, you know, they shopped with us, to frequency. Mainly you can look at, you know, do they come often or they don't come that often? And then the other thing we look at is what we call monetary values, that's the M. So just by using RFM, these 3 dimensions, you can already develop a good segmentation strategy. But then beyond that, you know, you can also do more complicated, more comprehensive segmentation using demographic data, using life stage data, using behavioral data, looking at customers' value, whether it's the current value or whether it's the value into the future. You can also do multidimensional, you know, you can put all these dimensions together and develop a more comprehensive, what we call like 3D or 360-degree segmentation. So there's all these different methods that you can do. But if you really kind of look under the hood, you know, you're hearing all these fancy names, underlying, you know, the statistical method, it could be just a clustering analysis, right, that you all are pretty very familiar with. Once you develop the segments, the next thing we do is we go into a prediction. This is where a lot of the predictive model goes into here. And I will not go into too much detail, but underlying, you know, this is really a lot of the regression, like those kind of decision trees, those kind of things. And also you talk about now gradient boosting, those kind of technique that we will actually leverage to do modeling. And then once you have all of these, last but not least, you need a measurement scheme. And this is where, of course, experimental design comes into play here. So you can read at your leisure about the things that are listed down below all these 4 titles. And then as we mentioned, you know, when we talk to a client, we also need to do what we call a assessment of their analytic involvement. Are they at a very early stage, meaning they are at a very basic level in terms of the comprehensiveness, the complexity of their analytic solution, or they are already kind of more in the later stage. Based on that, we also sit down with our client. We develop what we call like a roadmap. We can start with some low-hanging fruit. So, our partners, the marketers we work with, can have some quick wins. Then they can help them to gain confidence to demonstrate how statistics, how analytics can help organizations to improve their marketing program. And then once we have that, we build our relationship, we build confidence, we can then map out the more comprehensive down the road. How can we go step by step, gradually develop a very comprehensive analytic solution. And these are really the two things, that currently I am involved with. Currently, I'm working with a couple of different clients. One is with a marketing mix model. This is really, try to understand whether there's any room to further improve the efficiency, the allocation of a client's marketing dollar. And the other one I'm working with is the attribution problem. So nowadays, if you think about a client, nobody only use one channel. Everyone use multiple channels. So $1 million question they want to answer is, is the channel working? Are they working efficiently? How can I credit my business success to these different channels? And attribution engine actually help our client to answer those questions. And the verticals, Epsilon is actually like a consulting company. So we are more on the vendor side. So we actually work with a variety of different industries. This, if you recall, I think in one of Victor's slide, he mentioned about this subject matter expert. This is where, once you come into an organization like Epsilon, you may start to focus on a particular vertical, and then the domain knowledge in a particular vertical will also help you with your career advancement, not only your analytical or statistical knowledge. Here is a survey from Gartner, they are surveying the marketers, talking about the things that the marketers think are very important versus, what the marketing team they have or the vendors they work with are very capable. So in one sentence, you see all these different dimensions, there is gap, so this is where, not only people are looking for data and analytical skills, they also look for people's knowledge in terms of marketing, in terms of the industry, and also, the strategic recommendation, all these different things. And then this is really a similar diagram than I know Victor also showed. For you to be successful in an organization like Epsilon, initially, your analytic knowledge, the technical skill may help you move up the career ladder. But eventually, I think more important is some kind of the business soft skills, the communication skills, the knowledge about the domain, the client you are working with, the writing skill, all these. And nowadays, you also need to work with other departments. We work with our database department, we work with finance, work with account team. So you need to also develop this a certain level of knowledge about how the other group works, so you can work together successfully as a team to ultimately drive success for our clients. So this is really, like a typical career path for an organization like us. You start with, an analyst, then maybe 2-3 years down the road, you move to a senior level. This is where the path start to split into one is a more technical track. That's, if you're really interested in all this technical know-how, you gradually move into lead or principal role without any people management responsibility. But for some of the other people who are more interested in, people-to-people interaction management, then you go to a manager role and eventually go to director, VP, and so on. So yeah, I know I go through my slides very quickly, but you will have a chance to review these once they get posted. So back to you, Risa.
Thank you so much, Danny. And I would like to thank all our speakers for very informative talks. And we have one question from an attendee. The question is, what level of knowledge about the finance sector do the employers expect from a statistics PhD student? Is research background required, or does it matter a lot? And how can they prepare themselves for for a job at the financial sector, especially if they don't have any prior work knowledge?
Okay, I can start first. So for financial sector, it has a lot of different fields actually, and if you are interested in quantitative financial management or quantitative investment, then definitely you need to know significant amount of modern portfolio theory, basically how to manage portfolios and understanding finance and economics, and probably getting a CFA or trying to get a CFA. If you're interested in risk management, that is closer to what Daniel talked about. You may want to consider some kind of FRM and going through some kind of risk management training, but also involving a lot of economics and finance. So those two are already very different fields, but kind of related. And then the third one is, of course, many financial companies hire a lot of people doing marketing, or marketing analytics, or marketing data scientists, and then you need to understand a lot of marketing. So on that one, you can pick up one of those MBA standard marketing textbooks and study it. And so you need to know some kind of basic knowledge of marketing. And there are financial firms that also hire people who run operations, like running the call center analytics. That is the operations field. So they are all pretty distinct, actually. I don't know if Danny or Daniel has any other inputs.
Sure, this is Daniel. I can get additional inputs on this question. So given we know this top kind of very hot market, right? So as Victor mentioned, it's preferable to have those CFAs and things, but given the hot job market, I wouldn't discourage any PhD in statistics students and to submit a resume if you look at a job that looking for like some talent without extensive work experience. Is encouraged. Definitely preferable that if your topic tied into some financial sector topics like you studied student loan market or mortgage market data to look at, that definitely a plus. I think we value that kind of research background a lot if you have that. If you don't, as I said, don't be discouraged. If you basically, we have to make sure that you covers all the core kind of training in statistics. This is very valuable. Nothing can kind of easily prepare for that kind of research and study, right? So there's always that, what I found out is in the real work, you probably only apply 5–10% of what you learned, right? It's more of your ability to do in-depth research when you encounter the real problem. And that ability really counts the most. If you have a chance to, like I said, understand the industry, right? Understand how the industry, the firms makes money, and give people some good impression. You try to know more about this firm and this industry. That will leave a very good impression to the hiring manager. Then you will probably stand out from other PhD statisticians which have lesser knowledge than you. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Danny, we can't hear you.
Yeah. So for some quick points, I just want to add is, if you have decided about the areas that you want to get into, at the minimum, you may just take some class from your school, right? So when you show your resume, you can show that. And if you can do some kind of school projects, that will be even better. And even I think the best is if there is opportunity for you to do some kind of internship, within that industry you want to get into. I think those are really the good talking points you will have when you are face-to-face with your prospective employee.
Great. I just want to ask one last question. Daniel mentioned that he has some openings, but I think questions that our audience might wonder is, when should they start applying for jobs in the companies that you're working at? And also, do you have any internship programs?
So I'll take this. Okay. So there are openings. I actually, before this seminar, I looked at my company's website, just from external person, what they can see. You can type in different titles. Just don't type in just one title. Data scientist, there's someone that's just typing quantitative that pop out 60 plus jobs there. And you'll be careful. Some are more for the financial kind of quantitative modeling. Some are more for the credit. Some are just try to put in a good word. They're quantitative, but it really is not a modeler job. So it's still openings here. To my opening, I'll probably open up next couple of days. Stay tuned if you're really interested. I try to put a little marketing for my own job.
Yeah, and I think at Epsilon we continually have summer internship program where we hiring college students. And for me personally, I started as a summer intern, and then at the end of my internship, I got a full-time job offer from Epsilon. That's how I started my career.
Yeah, that's a great point, Danny. Summer intern is one of the best ways to get into the door. So my team also hires summer interns pretty much every year. Usually they are graduate students in statistics or computer science or data science kind of programs.
Yep.
Yeah, I also see that the Citizens Bank also have this summer intern and also like a business analyst, the rotational program to get into the door. That every year is different depending on budget.
All right, great. And we're just about out of time. I'd like to thank all our speakers for giving us invaluable information about the career paths in non-healthcare industry. I would also like to thank our attendees for joining in and asking questions. Following this meetup, our attendees will be receiving an email with a link to a brief survey so they can provide us some feedback. And finally, I hope you all participate in upcoming NISS events and have a great day. Thank you all for joining us. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.